Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Patterson-Gimlin files. Today, we're looking at the evidence that goes to show that this video is not a hoax. Let's get into it. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the actual camera footage. So, the Patterson-Gimlin footage starts out very blurry and shaky. That is Roger Patterson getting off his horse and filming the Bigfoot. Now, let's talk about the blurriness. I believe the blurriness is because, number one, he is seeing a creature he's been looking for his entire life, and number two, he's getting off his horse. There's nothing shady there, and it makes sense for it to be so blurry. Most Bigfoot videos you see are extremely blurry and low quality. Now, this one quickly adjusts, and he gets a near perfect image of this Bigfoot walking across the creek. I believe that if it was his friend in a costume, you would not have seen that blurry part in the beginning. I believe that they would have already had the camera set up so they could just catch their friend walking across the creek. However, as we see in the footage, that is not what happens. It starts out very blurry, he gets off his horse, and then it adjusts. Now, this is where most Bigfoot videos would have ended. However, this one does not. We see the Bigfoot start walking into the woods, and we see Roger Patterson following after it. He even repositions himself to get better camera angles. This all goes to show that, in my opinion, it is not a hoax. Number one, it wouldn't have been blurry. Number two, he wouldn't have repositioned himself. And number three, the quality would not have been so good. Let's talk about more than the actual camera footage. One thing I would like to bring up is how the Bigfoot walks. Now, I can't show you the actual video, but I recommend you put this video on in the background as you watch the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Now, how this Bigfoot walks is commonly called the tightrope walk. It's where, just imagine somebody walking on a tightrope. You know how their feet go one in front of the other in like a line. There's no space in between their footsteps. Obviously, it's one in front of the other, but they're right behind each other. They're not side to side. Well, that is how this Bigfoot walks. It puts one foot in front of the other in a straight line like somebody walking on a tightrope. However, humans do not walk like that. Humans walk in a straddle kind of form. That's where there's two footsteps. While one is a little more ahead of the other, they're very spread apart. Very different from how this Bigfoot walks. Talking more about how the Bigfoot walks, if you watch the actual footage, it's very comfortable in how it walks. Now, a human cannot fit into this, it wouldn't be able to fit into a costume of that size. Now, we will get to that later in the video, but what I want to talk about here is if someone somehow did fit into a costume that size, they would be so uncomfortable moving around. There's no way they would have a perfect technique down for how the Bigfoot would have moved. I think both how it walks and how naturally it is in the video go to show that this is some pretty compelling footage, and this might actually be the real deal. Let's talk about the footprints that were left behind by the Bigfoot. Now, what you can see on your screen is an actual photo of one of the footprints. On this photo, we can see what we call a mid-tarsal break. Now, a mid-tarsal break is where there's a flex in the foot. On this footprint, it is found in the middle of the foot. However, on human footprints, it is found in the front. This goes to show that no matter what, it's not a human footprint. Now, for most animals with mid-tarsal breaks, it's normally there for walking over rough, rugged, or uneven terrain. So it makes sense that a Bigfoot would have a mid-tarsal break. Now, I don't think Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson would have actually went so far to fake a mid-tarsal break, but they could have. Now I'd like to talk about the casts that they came back with. They came back with 10 casts, 5 right and 5 left. Now, what is so compelling about this is all the casts are roughly the same size. Now, when I say roughly, think about it this way. If you go walk around the mud, all of your footprints aren't going to be the same size. They're just going to be very similar. Well, that shows that this is pretty compelling. They weren't the exact same size. They were all just very close. Just like a real footprint. So I think when you combine how many they came back with, the fact that they were all the same size and shape, we can pretty much say that this is most likely real Bigfoot tracks, not a hoax. The final thing I'd like to say about the actual footprint is that when measured, it was about 45 inches long. That is nowhere near a human footprint. That is huge, and that is from the toe to the heel. That's extraordinary, and just the measurements alone make you highly doubt that this is a fake hoax. It makes you, there's no way this is a man or woman in a costume. Next, I'd like to talk about the height and weight of this Bigfoot. Now, many scientists have taken looks at this footage, and they have estimated that this Bigfoot is anywhere from 7 feet and 5 inches to 7 feet and 8 inches. Now, most rooms are about 8 feet tall. That would mean if this Bigfoot was standing straight up, it would be 4 inches below your ceiling. That is incredibly scary to think about and also incredibly interesting. Now, once again, it is very unlikely for a human to be able to fit in a costume that big without anything like stilts, and even with stilts, they wouldn't be able to walk as naturally as this creature did. Now, there's much more than the height. This Bigfoot is also very wide. Now, they haven't made an accurate assumption of how wide it is, but it is known that a human could most likely not fit in that costume. Another thing that they've tried to estimate is the weight. Now, the weight of this Bigfoot is believed to be anywhere from 500 pounds to 1,500 pounds. So anywhere from 500 to 1,500 pounds. That's incredibly large, and that's very large for a land animal. To talk more about the height, 1 in 100 million people end up being 7 feet and 8 inches. So, number one, they'd had to find one of those 1 in 100 million people, and number two, they'd had to be able to walk amazingly, just like this Bigfoot does. Not even to mention they wouldn't fit in the costume because of how broad and wide the Bigfoot is. To stay on the topic about the actual Bigfoot's body, if you watch the 60 FPS stabilized version of the footage, you can actually see the biceps and triceps moving. This is incredible, and just to be completely honest, that cannot be done in a costume. So as we move up the Bigfoot's body to its head, you can kind of see its skull looks a little weird. Now, you can kind of see where it kind of goes downwards, similar to a gorilla's skull. There's a vertical bone that we would assume would be inside this Bigfoot that is made for chewing stuff, just like a gorilla. Now, I do not believe that Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin would have invested all this time and all this money into getting a costume that does everything perfectly. And even if they wanted to, ape costumes at the time were not made to have that much detail. There's no way they would have known to put that bone in the position to be just like a gorilla's. And to be honest, I don't think that the technology was existing then or even now for them to even do it. It's purely impossible that this footage is fake. They couldn't have made a costume that real looking, and the bodily proportions are just far too large to be a human. Final thing I'd like to talk about in this video is the length of the Bigfoot's arm. The average human arm length, well, for a male, is about 75 centimeters. For a female, it's about 71 centimeters. This Bigfoot's arm, when measured, came out to 42 inches. Now, let's go ahead and translate that into a same measurement. So, 75 centimeters is about equal to 2.5 feet. 42 inches is 3.5 feet. So, stick out your arm right now and add one more foot, and that's how long this Bigfoot's arms were. That's incredible. That is obviously unhuman, and I doubt it could have moved as naturally as it does in the video if it was a costume. To be blunt, with all the evidence I've showed you today, it is almost impossible that this footage was fake. The bodily proportions don't line up. The way it walks is too natural and perfect. It's not a hoax, but we are doing one more episode on this footage, and I hope by the end of that I will have proved to everybody that this Patterson-Gimlin footage is real. Well, everybody, thank you for watching another episode of the Patterson-Gimlin Files. There's only one more episode left, and by the end of that episode, I hope I have convinced all of you that this is real footage of a Bigfoot. Now, before we sign off, I'd like to say that a podcast is going up tomorrow about ghosts and the paranormal. But if you're not into that, you can expect the next episode on this series Monday or Tuesday. Well, guys, thank you for watching, and next episode we'll wrap up this series. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay squatchy. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.